time. It was an interesting forced reflection.
Oh yeah, why so?
Well, you're in the middle of it every day, right? And
Yeah.
you don't think about what are those driving forces behind what's a priority, right? You're just dealing with the priority. So thinking about what has changed over a lot of years.
That's fair. Even that in itself is a really interesting perspective for people on the outside of a health system, right? Like at Handle, we combat conflicting priorities at every health system, right? Whether they're a customer or not, we run up against other things. And I also think it's important we have some interviews coming up with directors of supply chain or people kind of stepping into new leadership roles and so on. And I think hearing that concept from you would also be important for them to know that it's okay that there's not always like a super strategic PowerPoint and vision driving something. Like you're focusing on this thing because that's what the hospital system needs right now. And intuitively, you and the rest of the team know that that's what you need to work on. So you're working on it, right? I think a lot of times people get caught up in big decision support frameworks and things like that. But sometimes you can't lead like that. You can't make decisions in that light.
Well, almost never.
That's fair. That's fair. So you've been at Munson for about 5 years, right? Before that, Trinity, and then Children's Hospital. Talk me through your journey. And also, I have to ask about, I was looking and I saw aquatics at the YMCA. It was like your first job experience. Fun fact, Tracy, I don't know how to swim, and I'm just doomed forever. It's impossible for me.
No, I could get you to swim.
I've tried for years. I cannot. Head underwater, I can get to the other side of the pool, but I can't figure out treading water for the life of me. I mean, literally for the life of me. If I were on a boat, it'd be bad.
This is now a project on my life list.
Fair.
So yes, I started life as a YMCA professional and was an aquatics person, coordinator, director, and then a youth and family services program director. I was a camp director, which I think explains a lot of my outlook on life. Live life as a camp director and anything is possible. And I did that YMCA thing until about 1990 or so. And then I decided that I would go back as an adult learner and finish my bachelor's degree. And then I earned a master's degree, both in economics, and was teed up to go work for FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. In January of 1993, there was a hiring freeze in the federal government. And so some friends of mine who happened to work at the Blood Center of Southeastern Wisconsin were having some trouble managing the logistics process at that regional blood center. And they said, I know this is not what you want to do. I also know that you're not working right now. So would you come and just help us out? So I agreed to a short-term, it's really a consulting gig. I was there a couple of weeks and had a big long list of issues within their logistics process that I thought was holding them back. And had my meeting with the manager of accounting, which is where that team reported up. And she's like, wow, this is a lot. This is great. What do we do to fix it? And I said, that is not free. Yes. I said, that would require like a real job. And she said, but you don't want to do this. And I said, no, but it looks like I'll be in town for at least a year. So I'll stay a year if you want me to do this. And so we agreed to that 1 year commitment, and I was there for 7 years.
Oh, wow.
I stayed on and added to my portfolio, which became purchasing and accounts payable and other duties as assigned within the Blood Center of Southeastern Wisconsin. And that's where I really started to learn about healthcare supply chain. The Blood Center had a research component. They worked with the medical college. They had obviously all the donor rooms for their public-facing presence and blood collection activity, but it's also a reference laboratory. And so many different aspects of healthcare and healthcare supply chain. That was my learning laboratory. And from there, Children's Hospital. And again, it was right place, right time. The Blood Center and Children's Hospital both had their distribution center warehouse in the same facility. It was sort of like a condo for healthcare supply chain. There was the county hospital, there was the Children's Hospital, and then the Blood Center. So we got to know one another, and they encouraged me to come and work for the Children's Hospital, where I spent the next 13 years in their supply chain, left as the director there before coming to Trinity.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome. That's so funny how kind of one shift determines the entire rest of your career. Also, super respect the adult learner. Similarly, I got my master's. I didn't do undergrad, and I got my master's when I was 32, something like that, 30. So it was like a late in life, okay, I want to figure out how to do something else now decision. So I love that. You mentioned Live Life as a camp director, and I didn't know that at all until I started kind of like digging into your LinkedIn to prep for this, but it makes 100% sense, right? You know, the way we have our general conversations and our bi-weekly meetings, or how you embrace new technologies or just people, is very warm and welcoming, and you're open to new ideas continuously. In a environment, hospitals that typically aren't open to new ideas constantly, and people are sometimes pretty guarded, right? Because they're kind of building their kingdom sometimes, or they're afraid to share their domain. How has that, I don't know, kind of shaped your experience inside of hospitals, being the open personality and welcoming and inquisitive versus kind of a typical culture that's not really?
I think that I get to participate in conversations and projects that I would not otherwise be a part of.
Fair.
Because I think problem solving or searching for solutions is a natural component of running a supply chain, being part of an effective supply chain. You're continually looking to remove barriers or find a time-saving element that will bring some efficiency to whatever the platform is. And so you begin to have those conversations either right before a meeting starts or just after a meeting ends, in the hallway. And it comes in the same spot where you might have seen somebody's kid in the newspaper. And so, you know, you cut out the article, you bring it, and then ask what's going on.
Yeah.
And it could lead to a completely different challenge that person is trying to solve for. And they ask, you know, and all of a sudden you're part of the team, right? You're part of the discussion to help try and solve the problem or remove the barrier. So I think human relationship is a key element, whether you're working with the supplier community, whether you're working with a developer, whether you're working with a team member within your own facility. You have to be able to listen and understand a point of view that you may not share, and then try to find, you know, the best outcome for everybody.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons I was excited to chat, just your demeanor and openness about basically any conversation. Do you think being in Traverse City, which is, I've been once, and it's a really neat kind of like, not secluded, but secluded community, right? There's more small shops and restaurants than like big chains and things like that. It seems very family and people oriented. Everywhere I went, everyone was super polite. Do you think, one, it seems like Traverse City is a perfect place for you, but two, do you think that Munson being in that kind of demographic leads to that mindset at the hospital?
So that's an interesting perspective. That's a good question. Traverse City is a destination. It's a vacation destination. It's a beautiful, secluded, rural place where people come to spend a week or 10 days.
Yeah.
And those of us who are lucky enough to live here, just kind of look around and say, I'm living in a vacation destination, right? So I think so. What also adds to it is it's rural. Like, we're removed from metropolitan areas. I mean, the closest metropolitan area is probably Grand Rapids, and that's 2 hours away. And so you got to figure out a solution because there's nobody nearby to do it for you, right? So I think there's a service culture that is a part of Traverse City, whether it's hospitality for the guests who are coming. So that experience in the shops and the restaurants, and that is very much a part of the community because tourism is critically important to our economy. We're a town of 16,000 people, and during the National Cherry Festival, our population goes to about 500,000 people. And so you need to be nice to the guests and help them, navigate their vacation. But it also causes all sorts of downstream issues that the health system needs to be able to support. So our urgent care gets really busy. Our emergency room gets really busy. There are more strokes in the community when there are a lot of people here because there's just more people. And so this July has been the busiest time in the history of Munson Medical Center and Munson Healthcare, just because of the large influx. Not only that reason, but it's a big part of why we've been so busy. And the same is true. People expect a world-class healthcare experience when they are introduced to our facilities, whether it's through the urgent care or ask a nurse telephone call or coming through the emergency room. Is they want to be taken care of, and we do our best.
From my experience with Munson, you guys don't operate like a rural care provider at all, right? The facility is amazing, and you're constantly taking on unique technology partners, right? Typically, if you put a rural care provider in a box, you're thinking about someone that is kind of, routine replacement driven, supporting a local community, but not doing a ton of unique endeavors to provide more care, optimize the organization. But every month I talk to you, you're doing something else unique, right? That is in of light, a cutting edge care provider in a metropolitan area, right? So talk me through that, because Munson, while a rural facility, isn't a rural facility at all.
So we are state-of-the-art facility. We have a comprehensive stroke center. We have a world-class cardiovascular program. We have the Munson Orthopedic Institute, which is just incredible. We just added technology, a fixed PET scan to support our oncology program primarily. We operate a specialty pharmacy. I feel like I'm leaving somebody out, but it is a world-class facility. The technology, whether it's surgical assist robots, we have the Ion robot, we have Da Vinci robots, we have the Rosa robot. So we're doing the technology that enables the best and safest care for our community. Also understanding that if they didn't get that care here, they would have to travel no less than 2 hours, maybe 4 hours to get the care, or even leave the state of Michigan to pursue that care. And so we want to provide access to the people of Northern Michigan. Our service area is over 11,000 square miles. Everything north of US Highway 10 in the state of Michigan is essentially part of our service area. And there are very few other providers in that space. And so we have to build a strategy that allows for different levels of care based on where you are. And the highest level of care, the most acute patients would come to Traverse City. But there are diagnoses where you can stay in your hometown. And there will be a hospital there to provide that care. And then there's a regional center. And then finally, the medical center is for the most complicated cases, most complex care.
You guys are really in an interesting position from that perspective. If we just talk about like economical dynamics, a lot of organizations that are in the metropolitan areas, they're competing with another health center, and that's what's driving initiatives, right? You guys aren't necessarily competing with someone local. You're competing with inconvenience or poor care to your potential members and patients by having to travel further, right? So it's not a concept of winning business versus another hospital across the street. It's a concept of improving through necessity and taking care of the community outside of comparative margins to hospitals competing against each other, which I think is really interesting. We talked to a lot of chief strategy officers and so on, and they're saying, well, this is happening in the city and this is happening in the city, so we need to do this to grow. And you guys are more so, all right, this is happening in the space and this is happening in the community, so we have to grow, which is a really, I think, a unique perspective.
It really is. And I think you're spot on with the difference between being in a metropolitan area like Chicago or New York or even, Cincinnati, whatever, where there are multiple providers within the community, and the people have a choice. They can choose to go to hospital A or hospital B. For the most part here, hospitals A through H are all Munson Healthcare. So it's just where you live and what your diagnosis is. And our focus is really on a commitment to those communities and making sure that we have the right tools to take care of them. So,
Love it. So speaking of tools, there's a lot of tools in a supply chain leader's toolkit, whether that's from human components to software, etc. What do you think some components of either your role at Munson or just healthcare supply chain in general that you think are misunderstood, right? Whether problems you solve or tasks you take. When we started the interview, you mentioned the concept of having to rapidly solve problems and not being able to always strategically plan and build a deck and so on. Do you think that's one of the most common misconceptions about healthcare supply chain?
I think probably the most common misconception about healthcare supply chain is that we're still materials management. And so other people are placing orders and we're making sure they get their stuff. And that's certainly a part of what we do, but it doesn't represent what we offer the organization or how we bring value to the solutions. And so beyond, I think it's Fred Kranz uses the expression box kicker, right? So we're more than box kickers. We help to do the research. We do the negotiation with the support of our GPO and other sources, Handle being one of them, having visibility into what our equipment fleet is and what its age is and how it's performing allows us to have a completely different conversation with the supplier than we could have had before. So it's now a tool in our tool belt. The comprehensive nature of operations and operational management, supply chain supports that. And sometimes it's overlooked. People are confused that in this organization, we're part of finance. Why are you part of finance? Well, resources, right? Resources and resource allocation. And so when the organization has a target to meet a certain margin, it's important for supply chain to be a part of that planning and execution and help people stay focused on what is the goal. And it could be labor, right? So is there a labor saving technology that's available so that the people that we have can be put to the highest use of their capability? And so we introduced autonomous delivery robots in the hospital. They can carry cardboard and trash and recycling and all kinds of things all day long. And not get hurt and not call in sick. And then the people who used to do that work are able to either focus on food tray delivery or EVS or some other aspect of support within the hospital. And one of the biggest challenges, I think, everywhere in the country is labor. And so there's not enough people who want to do this work. And so if we can conserve the people for the highest level tasks and let technology help us with the things that are repeatable, that's win-win, right? So
yeah, I love where you're going with the labor, because that's something that I'm just laser focused on, is getting people to offload the tasks. For me, it's more so on the computer than, delivering trays and so on. But for me, it's how can we get people the manual labor that takes up 50 to 60% of the job? How can we take that off people's plates and refocus them on the 30 or 40% that's creative or strategic or driving ROI? I was talking to an equipment planning firm actually today, and they mentioned that about 50 to 60% of their project goes into actually placing things in a spreadsheet or researching something to put into a project. And while there's certainly value, right? That's why a hospital hires a third-party firm. They can provide more insight and value to a hospital if they spend more time in the data or helping make decisions or being able to do, aggregation of some sort. So I love that that's something that you're focused on, because I think with the AI shift in tools, it's becoming more and more easy, but it's also more and more easy to get distracted. What's your view on AI solutions from a personal work experience, but also things you're doing at Munson?
So there's quite a range, right? So you have the RPA kind of bot activity that is really exciting. I think it will ultimately become a part of the supply chain and finance backbone for those transactions that are the same over and over and over again. It's keystrokes. You can memorize the keystrokes with an RPA and let that person, again, do more value-added work. We are experimenting, trying use of Copilot within our health system. And so I've heard people using it to help transcribe their notes and put them with just the right number of prompts. You can get a report that looks the same every day, but it tracks who said it, what their report was, if there's any follow-up required. Something that might have taken a half an hour before is ready at the end of the meeting. That's interesting. The research part of it is still a little bit, requires a lot of human intelligence and review, but it'll pull together sources or publications across the net, or even within your own email or network, things that you may have written before, and bring it back to you and say, well, you said this a couple of weeks ago. So it's really, I think it's going to be a thing. I think it will become a more useful tool. I think it's still a little bit blunt right now. You were the first person that I saw with an AI assistant, and we had two of them on one meeting because we were trying.
Those are some of the blunders that occurred.
Yes. And I said, what is this? So
David's just going crazy.
So that is really interesting. The pioneer part of it will be actual clinician use. What's the right spot for them to utilize that in writing notes or researching for a diagnosis or something it's still very new. And so I don't think commonly, certainly not here, not part of the tool belt yet, but I think it's inevitable that we'll take advantage of that swiftly developing technology.
That makes sense.
I don't think it will replace human innovation. I think that still requires each of us to bring our talents and gifts to the table and conversation. But I do think it will become an integrated part of our daily life. It already is, to your point about, you look for something online and all of a sudden it fills, your advertising stream in Facebook or Instagram or whatever it is that you're, I was just looking at that, there it is.
Yeah. All the time.
So
the research component's really interesting. I mean, I think for us, I agree 100%. It'll never replace human innovation, because I also think the best service-oriented people will understand how to leverage it best for them too. Like an example, I know small bits and pieces about each medical device category, right? But if I'm working on a project with a hospital and they need to know about, they're working on electrosurgical systems, which like there's a wide range of kind of what someone could be talking about there. I can run a few deep research prompts. I can compare that to a customer's fleet, and I can have a more intelligent conversation than I would if I, were to just Google some stuff or look at core data, right? So I think, to your point, people's inquisitive nature and ability to be creative in prompting or using some of these tools, I think that's actually what it's gonna take either services or software to the next level. I made a post on LinkedIn the other day that the differentiator is not who is the best coder who has the best UI, UX in their platform. It's who is able to leverage AI and provide rapid value the fastest, right? Kind of iterate quickly, because I mean, even at Handle, if someone wants a button change, we can do that, and like we can turn that around now. And 10 years ago in software, that wasn't a thing. And some people are still using, no disparagement to any of these big solutions, some people are still, their businesses run on those platforms that are multi-billion-dollar companies, and they're not going to implement vibe coding or things like that where you can change a button like that. I think it's interesting.
Just a practical application. We're building a couple of ambulatory surgery centers. And so we were building the budget and planning for that. And I got the list, right, as a part of the review process. Is everything there? I went to Copilot and I said, what's all the equipment I need to open an ambulatory surgery center?
Yeah.
And it gave me a list in 5 seconds, and I could go back and forth. Oh, we actually missed some things in our list that were on the Copilot list. And it allowed us to provide a better budget estimate and a more complete bill of material that we needed.
I love that story. That's something that like our marketplace team does all the time for people planning. And it's such a practical application of things that are readily available if you just think about using it as an aid or an assistant, right? Like it sounds like you're doing the same thing, but like treating an agent like an employee, right? Because normally either you or you would send it to someone and say like, hey, can you make sure this has the full list? And to do that, they'd say, all right, well, let me look at our ASCs here, or let me Google, or let me call someone. And that would take 4 days, right? Or whatever it would take, versus a prompt, and you get a list, and maybe the list is 90% accurate, right? And that's part of knowing, there's always going to be iteration, but even 90% accurate in 30 seconds is better than whatever in 4 days. So
you're hitting on what many people call directionally correct, right?
Yeah.
So it's risky. So to be directionally correct means that you're willing to be wrong. And that's okay with me. You asked sort of the difference in how I approach the world and maybe other people. That's one of the big differentiators. For me, it's okay for our team to be directionally correct in our approach and get somewhere and have accomplishments, versus being perfectly well prepared and losing weeks, months of time to get to probably the same result.
Yeah.
I think that's the mindset of accepting help from an agent, from technology.
Yeah. So I love that you said directionally correct, directionally accurate, because I remember you said the same thing at MARM about the student presentation. So one of the things that I think impressed me about the Michigan chapter of ARM was that you and Travis and the rest of the group put together a session to where students were presenting on real life supply chain problems and how they would solve it with either a startup or a service or something that would create value. And I think that mentorship and that mentality you were just talking about of it's okay to be wrong, but two, iterating rapidly is more important than a perfect presentation in 6 months. Can you talk me through kind of your thought process around just mentorship in general at Munson, externally, or a pod of people, and then, thinking about MARM and the students and kind of fostering education in that group? Because that chapter meetup was largely education based and value centric versus I've gone to someone who's like, you drink coffee and walk around for a couple hours, and that's fine too. I as someone that sells software, love that. But you guys focus a lot on creating value and education and growth inside the community. So can you talk through your mindset related to that?
Sure. So the case competition, really the credit for that goes to Ed Hiscock and bringing that forward. And I think Wayne State University was the first real participant where they latched onto this idea of having a day or half a day committed to supply chain students and really introducing them to the community of supply chain professionals through this case competition. My personal approach to mentorship is, and now we're going back to camp, so I enjoyed being able to work with campers when I was camp counselor, and I still hear from them. I've been in their wedding. There are these people, I keep them, they become part of my life. And so the relationship for me is more than professorial relationship or an employer relationship. I want to know people on a human level and understand what makes them tick and why they're doing what they're doing, because I believe that people are mostly good and have things to contribute. And so as a mentor, I'm thrilled that somebody is willing to take the time to listen to what I have to say and maybe try to apply it in whatever the appropriate forum is. I especially like hearing from them later, like it could be 10 years later, where I'll get a little email or something will come across LinkedIn that recognizes when we had time together and what it was, whatever it was that sparked their memory for that communication. And so being a mentor is not a 6-week intensive, where you're assigned somebody and, and then you say goodbye. That, for me, that's not mentorship. That's an assignment or a task or a consulting engagement or something like that. When you're mentoring, you're offering something of yourself. And I've benefited from so many as I've worked my way through life. And so I'm anxious to share that with others and try to do it in a way that's humble. I try to manage my language and stay away from hyperbole. Like, this is how to do it, or the only answer is. There are thousands, millions of answers. And so just having an approach or a mindset that I might have something to offer, but I have just as much to learn. I think that the illustration of the case competition in the MARM meeting, and it happens every spring, is just living that out and helping other people participate in that.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, it was great. I mean, there was a panel of maybe like 5 or 6 of the, I don't want to say judges, but judges that kind of gave feedback, and everyone offered a unique positive perspective and asked kind of challenging questions to why everyone was thinking about kind of their presentation concept. I thought it was great. And also, I love your concept of mentorship as well, because I agree it's not a short-term commitment to someone. My biggest mentor in my entire life, he was one of the groomsmen in my wedding, and I met him, I don't know, he was, I think, like 45 when I met him at my first tech company. I think it's important that people who truly invest in mentorship think about it in that same light, right? It really is caring about the person, not just making an employee better. Like, that's a manager, right? Like, a manager's job is to make Jim or Sally better at their job. Like, a mentor's job is to make them better at, or a better version of who that person wants to be, or be there for them, or kind of like a a co-family member kind of is the way I think about all the people I've spent time with, or like just extensions of my family, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. Love that. Awesome. So Tracy, a couple lightning round questions. Is there a recent book or podcast or just article you've read that's kind of changed the way you think?
Yes, two. So just the idea of AI at all was really context changing, and we've talked about that a little bit. So Copilot as a recent idea, if that counts as a recent idea,
Yeah.
it's a big deal. And then for pure reading pleasure, I am reading King, A Life by Jonathan Eig. It's all about Martin Luther King Jr. And his writing is beautiful. He's a Wall Street Journal reporter, editor, and has taken on writing about an icon.
Yeah.
And it feels like I'm watching him grow up right now. I mean, you learn about his sharecropper grandparents and who his dad became, and now him, and it's a wonderful read. Highly recommend. And you were in the National Writers Series. Jonathan, I came to Traverse City for National Writers Series that you can listen to on Interlochen Public Radio out of Traverse City, Michigan.
I need to get better at reading books for enjoyment, and not like, obviously you get something out of almost everything you read, right? But I pretty much only read like self-help or business books, and it's not enjoyment. It's like it's school. I'm leisurely going to school and forcing myself to read a couple chapters a day. Like, it's totally homework for me. Yeah.
So our family has started our own little book club, and the book to be read for we 2 books a year. So the spring book was Pride and Prejudice, and you talk about reading for pleasure. That was just pure pleasure. It's like reading Bridgerton, only the original, the OG.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Yeah, I need to bring that. I'm probably not gonna have a lot of free time in the upcoming months or year, but we'll see how I can bring it into my life more.
You'll find yourself awake at times you didn't anticipate.
That's fair. That's fair. All right, next rapid fire. If your team would use one word to describe your leadership style, what would it be?
So I asked them, I said, I need one word to describe my leadership style. On your mark, set, go. And I got similar but different words. Deliberate and passionate were the 2 words. And so then I inquired more to understand what do you mean by that, right?
Yeah.
And one of my team members sent me, he's like, well, I'm using this definition, and it's passionate leadership style is characterized by enthusiasm, strong belief in mission, the ability to inspire and motivate, and it involves leading by example and communicating effectively, fostering positive and engaged work environment. Passionate leaders are not just task-oriented. They connect with their team, understand their why, and ignite a shared sense of purpose. I was ready to pack up and go home forever, like that. Okay. And then I inquired about deliberate, and the feedback there was really complete, in that there's a process and a methodology that does not allow for emotional response or reactive sorts of behavior, but very deliberate. And if it requires fact-finding, or if it requires mitigation, or if it requires urgency, the deliberate leader can bring that to the situation while still maintaining a calm sense in the moment. And so it's incredibly humbling. I felt very complimented by each member of my team. It was 2 passionates and 1 deliberate from my immediate.
Yeah, that's great feedback. I mean, that makes perfect sense in my experience with you as a human, but also working with Munson holistically as an organization. Even in areas where my organization can improve, it's really never met with negativity from your team. It's more so, hey, this is challenge. Let's go find answer to challenge. And I don't think I've ever not smiled on a call at some point from like a positive fashion. I think that trickles through to the rest of your team as well, right? I think they fully embrace that mindset. Something I asked on my last interview, and actually it had the most comments of more comments about this than any part of any other interview I did, was if you could put a message on a billboard outside every hospital in Michigan, whether Traverse City or holistically, what would it say?
We're here to help you, and we improve lives. So our internal like tagline is we improve lives. Like just coming to work and accepting everybody who comes through our door. We want their life to be better when they head home, whether it's because they got stitches, maybe they got a stent, maybe some diagnosis, or whatever it is. We're here to help, and we want to help make your life better.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I don't know, that question just resonated so well with our audience, and I think is a really unique perspective. 2 more. A fictional character that you'd want on your team. So it can be from a book you're reading right now, a favorite show. I've heard Leslie Knope. I've heard a few other answers.
So somebody from the Marvel universe.
Fair.
I want Vision on my team.
That's fair. That's good. I like that. That's a good selection. I love it. Awesome. So Tracy, this has been incredible, as I knew it would be. Appreciate you so much, and obviously being here, but just kind of our general friendship and relationship. Any advice you have for Canopy listeners, either people stepping into a leadership role at a hospital system or trying to work with leaders at hospitals? Any advice for just people in the space?
So new people, try to spend as much time in your first 90 days listening as you possibly can. And please try to keep your opinion to yourself for that time frame, right? Like it's really important to understand the people you're going to be working with and for from their life perspective. It's really challenging. I've been in healthcare a long time, since 1993, and I lost track of how many times people say, well, at my last job, this is like, nobody cares what you did at your last job. They're worried about what's happening in their environment. And so if you can just listen and then bring your expertise and experience forward with, in my experience, I've seen this, or try to really listen to what's happening and get grounded in the culture in those first months that you're there, and make some relationships. Start building those relationships.
I love that. Yeah, I think a lot of people, and I'm guilty of this at every company I've joined, tries to make a change rapidly in the first 90 days or make an impact, because sometimes that's looked at favorably, right? Like, oh, this person came in and did this, but that sometimes isn't the best for true outcomes, right? It might be a good short-term transitional win, but not something that's actually, impactful, meaningful. And last question before we wrap, Tracy, I'm sure a lot of people are going to appreciate your perspective and enjoy the conversation. What's the best way for any of those folks to either get in touch with you or follow you and the journey you're kind of, progressing through?
So I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. You can find me there, and then be patient. Especially if you're in the supplier community, it takes me longer to reply to suppliers than it does other healthcare professionals. But I generally will, unless it's a clear play for just business.
Yeah, I will say from a supplier perspective, obviously I was fortunate enough to meet you after Handle was already, inside Munson. I will say that that's something that I think the supplier community as a whole could use coaching on. And maybe this is a second follow-up, because there's sales, and then there's just people that you might think are interesting that you want to talk to. And I try to be pretty deliberate in my LinkedIn messaging when I'm like, a great example is we had Patrick from VCU join the Handle community, but I reached out to him because I was like, hey, you just took a new job. You seem like someone that's interesting. Like, I just want your perspective on all new things joining a new hospital. Like, I don't want to sell you anything, but just tell me what your life's like right now. So I try to be pretty deliberate with messaging, but that's tough for a supplier because it's almost everything can be framed as a sale, as like an attempt to get business, right? Like, you're approached by hundreds of people every day, right?
Yes. And when it's within minutes of the link,
Yeah.
and I'm getting a hard sales line, then
Yeah.
it's like, I should never have clicked on you. Like, I never should have done this. And I'm continually surprised by the sense of urgency behind those individuals and their desire to make contact and get a response.
Yeah.
And that's simply not how it works in life. We want to meet new people and we want to get new ideas and we want to have that sense of knowledge sharing and community, but not with a price list in 35 seconds after being connected. And then I'll get emails or in messages that are trying to invoke like a guilt that I didn't get back to them soon enough, or, this is your last chance. And it's like, okay, it's my last chance until maybe we actually have something meaningful to talk about in the future. So,
Yeah.
I mean, everybody's busy. Everybody has a full plate.
Yep.
And so inviting additional people into your life is, I guess, risky or admirable, or maybe both. But there needs to be a tempered expectation around what could come from that relationship. I have some great professional relationships that came through LinkedIn, where the technology is in place in our hospital right now. And it's all because of LinkedIn.
Yeah.
But the approach was not a hard sell. It was, how can we solve this problem? Have you experienced this problem? I think that was the question that started our conversation. Is this a challenge for you in your organization? And we talked about it online, and then we talked about it on the phone, and then we met, and then I learned that they had a software solution that might help. That's very different than, here's the price on suture, take it right now.
Yeah. So moral of the story, supplier community, if you're listening, don't send leaders of supply chain a quote list with your first in-mail on LinkedIn. Get to know them as humans first and see if there's a problem.
Right.
Love it.
There's probably something we can solve together.
Yeah, 100%. Awesome. Well, Tracy, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being here with me for an hour. I think it was a great conversation.
Yeah, it was awesome. Thank you for inviting me. I enjoyed it.
Thanks for spending part of your day with us. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow us wherever you listen to podcasts, subscribe on YouTube, and share with your colleagues. It really helps us out. Special thanks to our sponsor, Handle Global. Handle's capital cycle management platform is transforming healthcare by turning complex capital data into clear, actionable insights. If you're ready for a smarter and faster way to build your capital budgets, visit www.handleglobal.com. And don't forget, if you're not already part of the fastest growing healthcare community and newsletter, head over to joincanopy.io to subscribe. We'll see you next time in the operating room.
Welcome to the operating room. Welcome to the operating room. Welcome to the operating room.